American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality.
Country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them? Civil Rights Acts were passed in the early 60s. You couldn't point the finger anymore?
Well, there was no doubt about the hypocrisy of large segments of the nation on the whole question of racial equality. I think the best example is that many of the senators from the North and the West, and congressmen generally, who voted for civil rights legislation in 64 and even 65 with the Voting Rights Bill, refused last year to vote for civil rights legislation because it dealt with an issue applicable to the North, the whole housing question. And this, it seems to me, was the greatest expression of the hypocrisy of many of our citizens and many of the senators and congressmen of the North.
But isn't that part of the dilemma now? That people knew that Negroes were being denied what was guaranteed to them by the Constitution, by the fact that they were citizens of this country. Then when they were given those rights, do you feel the white community said, well, we've given them all that we have, now it's up to them?
Well, I think the dilemma is much deeper, and I think one during this period of transition has to be very honest with America. And honesty impels me to admit that America has broad racist elements still alive. Racism is still existing in American society in many areas of the society, North and South. And the other thing is that there has never been a single, solid, determined commitment of large segments of white America on the whole question of racial equality. I think we have to see that vacillation has always existed, ambivalence has always existed, and this to me is the so-called white backlash. It's merely...
Check this out, how to do one on the news, man. Check this truth out. You heard what Martin Luther King said. This is really right here. Then we're going to go somewhere else.
But police have members claim to follow Moorish science. It comes from a black religious group that's been around for nearly a century. Most of its members obey the law, but not everyone. Chip Reed looks at how some use their religion to justify the crime.
This 35,000 square foot mansion in an exclusive corner of Bethesda, Maryland, has 12 bedrooms, 17 bathrooms, and trees planted by President Clinton and Vice President Gore. On the market for nearly $6 million, it's not exactly a steal. So imagine real estate agent Jordan Feinberg's surprise when he learned someone had moved into the vacant property.
The owner calls me again and says, the neighbor called, there are people inside the house claiming they own the house. And I'm like, what?
Lamont Butler, a.k.a. Lamont Maurice L., claimed the mansion for himself. He even provided documents issued by the so-called Moorish National Republic to back it up.
It's a burglary in the purest sense.
Across the country, Butler and many other self-styled Moorish nationals have laid claim to property and status they say is lawfully theirs because their ancestors were here first. In Memphis, Tennessee, Tabitha Gentry staked a claim on this $3 million foreclosed home using heavy chains. Charged with trespassing, burglary, and theft, Gentry, who prefers the name Abka Ray Bey, says as a citizen of the Moorish American National Republic, that land is her land. And this man was arrested by police in Fayetteville, North Carolina, for interfering with a stolen car investigation. But his wife claims the arrest was illegal because he is a member of the Moorish nation.
He had diplomatic immunity. Why are y'all doing this?
Moors trace their beliefs to Noble Drew Ali, who founded the Moorish Science Temple in Chicago in 1925. With tens of thousands of followers, the faith borrows heavily from Islam. It also teaches that all black Americans are Moorish Americans, descendants of an ancient Moroccan global empire, an idea some followers have taken one step further.
So you don't have to get a license plate or a driver's license. You can lay claim to property.
Spencer Dew, who studies the movement, says Moorish Americans have long taken pride in being American citizens. But as the group splintered over the decades, some offshoots abandoned that view.
But I also think we have some opportunistic individuals, some sort of lone wolf elements.
Jeff Fort is perhaps the most notorious movement member. The former leader of a violent Chicago street gang, he was convicted in 1987 of conspiring with Libya's Gaddafi regime to blow up U.S. government buildings.
It's kind of a public relations nightmare. The vast majority of Moorish communities in America are
You have to see his part.
As accurate would be known as someone who was a leader in the quote-unquote DC blacks.
All occurred with my friend Cadillac.
Okay, so you guys, we have none other than Nathaniel McQueen L., Moorish American. He's somebody that in the popular vernacular, which is not always accurate, would be known as someone who was a leader in the quote-unquote DC blacks, though nobody really calls themselves that, I guess, right? So this gentleman has an excellent book, a powerful book out called The Hills of DC. It's on Kindle. I've been making my way through the 600 pages, a powerful testimony of his life's journey from growing up to child in the first major city in America to become predominantly black through his time in federal prison, his time engaging in some behaviors maybe he's not happy about now, but maybe dealing with, it was choices he made with the situations he was faced with. He became a leader in the federal and Lorton prison system, and he is a guy that stood up for and participated in some very serious prison violence with white supremacists. His best friend was one of the people murdered by the Aryan Brotherhood, and they gave as good as they got and all that. So he saw my story the other day on AB versus DC Blacks. It was really just info I got from the internet and strung together. And he reached out to me, and we've been having some great combos. So always remember, go get his book, The Hills of DC. Welcome, Nathan.
First time I heard the phrase Aryan Brotherhood, I was down in Law, behind the
That's
wall.
the DC city sort of prison, for those who don't know.
Yeah, so it's Lawton, it's maximum security prison for DC prisoners in Fairfax, Virginia.
Which has been closed.
That's right. And I was, first time I heard, I think it was probably around about 1980.
What was the context? What was said about them?
Oh, they was talking about Mills, because he was down in Atlanta at that
Oh,
time.
Barry Mills, the Baron Mayor. Okay.
Yeah, they sent him down to Atlanta, and they had a ride down there.
And he cut a guy's head off.
Yeah.
A white guy who's on a bad drug deal or something.
Mm-hmm. And that's the first time I heard about him. And then I heard they was in the federal system, because see, I was in the federal system.
You know what I'm saying? Check that part out,
On March 16th, 2021, 6 women were
threatening Chicago police officers. It was a threat that they...
With all due respect,
Definitely not going to be any killing without killing.
Just for
You know, and I would like that to be clear for the record. I understand the fact that we got police in here. I wanted you to be here to understand what I said.
The police were outmanned, and they knew it.
They were more powerful than the police. I tell you the truth about it.
Either the community was on the side of the Stones, or death Chicago police officers. It was a threat that the gang was more than ready to make good on.
And there's not going to be no killing without killing.
He leads an Illinois congressman to a supermax prison.
It was Congressman Bobby Rush who went to AdMax prison in Florence, Colorado. He met there with 2 inmates who founded the gangs at the center of a dispute that police say triggered Tyshawn's murder a week ago tonight.
Eyewitness News reporter Charles Thomas live tonight from Colorado to tell us what happened at that meeting.
Ron, Kathy, I'm outside the most secure prison in the United States. It's where Congressman Bobby Rush held private meetings today with 2 of Chicago's original gangsters.
Right now, as I see it, they are part of the solution, not part of the problem.
The Reverend Congressman Bobby Rush was in full pastoral dress as he talked with Larry Hoover and Abdul Malik Kaba, formerly known as Jeff Fort, about Tyshawn Lee, the targeted 9-year-old murder victim.
They knew about it and they were appalled at it.
Hoover, who co-founded the Gangster Disciples, has been in prison since a 1973 murder conviction. Fort formed the Black Keystone Nation in the 1960s. His AdMax sentence is the result of a terrorism-related conviction. Investigators say a dispute between decades-later factions of gangs founded by Hoover and Fort led to the Tyshawn Lee murder last week.
Jeff, Malik, and Larry said, use my name. Tell those youngsters to stop the killing.
AdMax houses just under 500 of America's worst criminals, including 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui, the shoe bomber, the Unabomber, Oklahoma City, and Olympic bombers, to name a few. Hoover and Fort spend 23 hours a day in their cells and are allowed minimal human contact.
They didn't ask me to move mountains or to use any kind of cloud to help them.
Rush is convinced that if Hoover and Fort are allowed to communicate, they can help the now desperate effort to stem Chicago's violence.
We cannot continue to allow our community to be wiped out.
The prison would not allow the congressman to make photos or voice recordings during his visit. Hoover and Malik